So today we'll be continuing with our grammar review, and the last time we talked about sentence structure. We covered simple sentences, which are basically one main clause, as long as it does not contain any sort of conjunction. So you can have a long sentence, right? But if it doesn't have a coordinating or subordinating conjunction, right, you can add details with adverbs and adjectives and prepositions, right? But it will still be a simple sentence. Then you put compound sentences that are two simple sentences joined together using coordinating conjunctions. There's an acronym fanboys for that. We went through it. We went through some of the uh, you know technical details, perhaps, if you want to call it that, of how these sentences are constructed, and whether you need to repeat the subject or not, the punctuations used. And so we went through all of those. Then we talked about came to complex sentences. You talked about clauses and the type of clauses. You got the main clause and then the subordinate clause, and then we have a phrase. We took a look at what those are. We haven't experienced a subordinate clause yet, but we will. And then we went over all the subordinate conjunctions. Again, right, I say all these subordinate conjunctions, they're not all of them, right? I haven't listed all of them. There are many, many, many that you will experience as you know, interact with the English language. But these are some of the widely used ones, or the major ones, or the common ones, or whatever tag you want to give them. Now today we're not doing anything technical, uh, so to speak. We'll just be making sentences using as many of these as possible, right? It's kind of very basic in a sense, but to get you acquainted as to how they're used, right? What I would ask you to do later on after class, I'll put up a blank document in Google Classroom. And so, right, you should try and make as many sentences of your own using as many of these conjunctions. So let's start with time. That was the first on the list. And the first we have is as soon as. Now here I will bring your attention towards two things about subordinating conjunctions and complex sentences. So here are two sentences. I rushed to the hospital as soon as I got the news. So let's break this down, right? This is the subordinating conjunction. So let's put that as SC. Now, what we want to identify over here is the main clause and the subordinate clause. So can anyone identify the main clause for me? Could you repeat that, please? Okay, so I rushed to the hospital is the main clause. That is correct, right? So this is the main clause. Now, what's the subordinate clause? I mean, it looks pretty straightforward, but still tell me, what is the subordinate clause? Anyone?
I got the news.
Okay. Now this is what I want to highlight. If you look at I got the news, and given our definitions of main and independent clause, right? So a clause is a part of a sentence containing a subject and a verb, or an object as well, again, right? Depending on whether it's transitive or intransitive. Uh, and then the main clause gives you complete meaning on its own. The subordinate clause does not give you complete meaning on its own. When you read I got the news, if I wrote down this sentence separately, I got the news, would you classify this as a simple sentence? That's the question. If this was the only thing written,
Yeah.
right? So on its own, this is a simple sentence, and by definition, a simple sentence is a main clause, which means it has a subject and a verb, and it's giving you complete meaning, right? So this is not the subordinate clause, because the subordinate clause needs to have incomplete meaning. So how do you do that? Right now, the thing that here's where the difference between coordinating conjunction and subordinating conjunction comes in. Coordinating conjunctions, right? We treated them separately. So uh, they didn't win, but learned a lot. So if I took the sentence, they learned a lot, right? So I can treat both of these sentences separately, and I can remove the conjunction from the sentence and treat these two simple sentences separately, right? Or any of these. She was running late. She packed her breakfast for later, right? I can remove the so from here, and it works. And the thing about subordinating conjunctions is it becomes part of the sentence, right? If I'm using a subordinating conjunction, I cannot remove it and look at the sentence. If I look at the sentence on its own, it's a simple sentence. It's a complete sentence, right? So it's another main clause. So I could just say, well, it's two main clauses joined by a subordinating conjunction, right? And so that would completely remove the concept of having a subordinate clause. But a subordinate clause, right? So if I look at it with the conjunction, now why does it happen? It does, right? That's the language. I'm sure there's a linguistic reasoning for it as to why it is the way it is, but just take it as it is, right? This is how it is. And so when you're making sentences, you need to be careful that you don't use any of these which students tend to do very, very often, right? They start a sentence or they use a subordinate conjunction somewhere, and without realizing that that is an incomplete sentence, right? They put a full stop at the end, and like, oh, I said what I said. No, it's not, right? So if I wrote this sentence, as soon as I got the news, right? And this is all I wrote. Is this giving you complete meaning? Amar
No.
Zabakar, are you there? Right? Hopefully you're following along.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So if I write as soon as I got the news, it is not giving you complete meaning, right? And that's the point. This is a subordinating clause or a dependent clause. And remember, based on you know the definitions of the board of both of them, the main and subordinate clause, what we learned is a, let me change color over here, a subordinate or independent, whatever, sorry, dependent. Let's use both of those. Clause needs a main or independent clause to give complete meaning, right? So only when I look at it, right, I rushed to the hospital as soon as I got the news. Oh, so now I know, right, what happened as soon as I got the news. I rushed to the hospital. When I say it together, Now it's making sense, right? Does it make sense? Is it making sense? Anyone? No sense? Nonsense? Feeling sleepy in the evening?
Sir, it is making sense.
It's
Okay. It is
it's
4.
same the both ways. Yeah.
Hmm?
It's exactly the same the both ways.
Oh, good that you brought it up. Okay. So, in most cases with complex sentences, I can write the sentence both ways, right? So, one is I rushed to the hospital as soon as I got the news, right? The other is as soon as I got the news, I rushed to the hospital. In with many of the subordinating conjunctions, I can write the sentence both ways. In terms of its complete meaning, it's the same, right? So I can have the main clause come in first and then the subordinate clause coming in next with the subordinating conjunction, or I can have this, I can start with the subordinating conjunction and bring in the main clause later. What's the difference? The difference is, first of all, as you can see over here, I rushed to the hospital as soon as I got the news, and that is just one, sentence going on. There's no punctuation in between. Whereas if you're starting with the subordinating conjunction, the subordinate clause, as soon as I got the news, you see I've put in a comma over here, right? You need to put in that comma if you're starting with the subordinate clause, right? That is the grammatical requirement. So if you miss on that comma, you lose marks for grammatical accuracy, right? And then you bring in the main clause. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing is, why would you want to do this? I mean, like, you have an option. So is it okay to go either way? Generally, yes. But does it make a difference? Also, yes. Right? What kind of a difference does it make? So uh, it's from my limited understanding of languages, what I've come to understand is when you make a sentence, you start the sentence by mentioning the thing of most importance, right? The thing that you want to emphasize. So, right over here, there are two things that can be emphasized: either rushing to the hospital or getting the news, right? As soon as you got the news. So, what do you want to emphasize to the reader or to the listener if you're speaking? Do you want to emphasize that you rushed to the hospital as soon as you got the news, or do you want to emphasize that as soon as you got the news, you rushed to the hospital? You didn't wait. So what's the difference, right? You rushing to the hospital, how is that, putting emphasis? Well, you didn't uh, take it calm, you didn't, relax or something. In that sense, right? You were very quick to go to the hospital, right? And then as soon as I got the news, emphasizes that you didn't wait, right? You got the news and the first thing you did was go to the hospital. So in general, you say, well, it amounts to the same thing pretty much, right? So it is a subtle, in some case detail, in some cases it would make a bigger difference, right? So something for you to consider when you're using it. What do you want to give importance? You mentioned that first. Is that technical point clear?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Now, these were the two main things I wanted to highlight, right? Why is a subordinate clause giving incomplete meaning? We've gone over that, the punctuation, and then, right, which one you mentioned first. There are certain cases where you can't go both ways, right? So, right, if that happens, like you need to just take a look at the sentence and see, is this making sense, right? As long as it's making sense, I mean, like proper sense, not like, oh, it makes sense to me, but if it's making proper sense, then that's fine. Okay, next up we have till. So remember, we're talking about time. I will wait till he completes his homework, right? But pronouns are also something students tend to mess up very frequently, right? They start off with a he, and somewhere in between they're writing that he, uh, mutates into a her, or vice versa. And so, right, I haven't come across that with your writings, right? But we haven't done a lot, and hopefully, I won't become. It is something I come across with students in general. So, just mentioning that. Until. Until his condition stabilizes, I won't take a break. Now, remember, I'm only going through this to show you how each of these conjunctions can be used. And I'm only giving you one example, right? You can obviously make the sentence by flipping this around. I won't take a break until this condition stabilizes. So you can obviously flip that around, or you can make a completely different sentence using the same conjunction in, with the main clause coming in first. Okay, when we'll go to meet my sister, when she comes home from the holidays. Now, right, obviously this is not the when that's used as a question, right? When are you coming? That's a question. That's one part of the W5H questions, right? This is not one of those, just to be clear. Right, this is a when that's used as a subordinating conjunction. Whenever. Okay, here's a fun one. Whenever I see your email in my inbox, comma, I know there's some kind of mess you need my help cleaning up. Right, or you could change it to a WhatsApp message, right? Whenever I see your message in WhatsApp, I know there's some kind of mess you need my help cleaning. While you should visit your brother while you're in the city. If there's any confusion with any of these, obviously, ask. I've tried to make them as clear as possible. Now that Rahil has been, oops, not been promoted, he's busier than ever before. Take your medicine before you go to bed. After. This is something we can all, do. Appreciate after we're done with dinner, or in your case, after we're done studying. Right, so let's change that. After we're done studying, let's go out for ice cream. Right, and ice cream is fun to have during the winter. By the time dinner will be ready, by the time we reach home. Now, these standalone sentences sometimes don't make as much sense, right? You're like, oh, well, if you're not at home, how will it be ready? And so it's possible that these members of the family are outside and there's someone at home who is preparing dinner. So by the time they get home, dinner will be ready. So you can just assume some context for that. And what really matters is when you are writing a lengthier piece, which basically comes down to your narrative or descriptive you choose to, and obviously your descriptive, sorry, narrated writing. So, right, making it fit in properly is important. Okay. Uh, by the time and after. Since, and just keep the since in mind because we're going to come across another since after this. Since meeting her idol, Bilkis has been super motivated. You notice I put a hyphen between these two. So, right? You can make compound nouns using super, and that, when you're saying something super something, like I'm super hungry, means that basically means you're like very very hungry, right? So it's being super motivated. She's, very very motivated, really doing, putting in a lot of effort. Another thing, if you've noticed, right, I tend to use names that are very, that match our society and culture. So just because we are doing English doesn't mean we are bound to have Johns and Jacks and Adams and, Matthews and all of those people. You could if you want to, but that is not what defines the language, right? A language is a means of communication, so you can very well have characters like, Bilal and Bilqis, or whoever you prefer to mention. In fact, generally I encourage my students on that note to have characters from, that represent your own uh, backgrounds. Okay, next up is manner. And the first thing we have in manner is a how. Again, this is not the question how. So, and how, like the way you could make a sentence using this: I'm interested in seeing how you perform in today's match. Then you've got as though, into space, as though. So as though a man possessed he worked on the assignment for 3 days straight. And then you have as if. The new employee spoke to the manager as if he was the one in charge. We tend to write in charge as one word or with a hyphen. It's not like that. I mean, I've tried searching if it works that way. I have come across some, hint that it might work, but otherwise the proper way is, writing it separately from my understanding. So better to go with that, unless, you do your own bit of research and come up with, it's okay to use with a hyphen or use it as one word, then yeah, sure. Then we have reason. I hope we can cover this all today. If not, we'll just be a bit left over for tomorrow, and then we'll cover that and move over to punctuations. So obviously the first one we're going to talk about is because. Because of the flight delays, comma, she was late for her own wedding. Unfortunate. Oh, another thing I'd like to point out, since we're talking about conjunctions, there's sort of this made up rule that is popular, I would say, that you cannot start a sentence with a conjunction. So you can't start a sentence with and, or, so, or like because is the one of the usual suspects. So people are okay with starting a sentence with since, for example, right? But grammatically, since and because are the same thing. They're both subordinate conjunctions, and even more, you spread the net, and so since and because and or and itself, they're all the same because they're all conjunctions. So can you start grammatically, like proper grammar, English grammar, can you start a sentence with a conjunction? Yes, yes, you can, right? So I'm not telling you this so that you go and argue with your teacher if you're at school and you're like, okay, if they don't want it, like you can try and reason with them. You can share an article with them or show them like, oh, these articles available on thesaurus.com or Grammarly, right? And these are renowned uh, resources, right? So as far as English language is concerned, so you can show them the article. That's perfectly fine to start a sentence with a conjunction, but just so that you know, right, that this is sort of a rule that is a myth, right? There is no actual rule of this kind in English. All that's required is if you're starting with a conjunction, you need to make sure that you have a proper complete sentence at the end where you put your full stop, right? Okay, now remember I asked you to remember since. We have this since for time. Now we have another since for reason. And so what you need to do is obviously know what's the difference between either of these. So how did I use this? I started off with the conjunction. So let's do the same over here as well. Since she couldn't get into med school, comma, Fauziya decided to pursue her interests in the arts. Right? Uh, this sentence really reflects our focus as far as mainstream uh, schooling is concerned. Anyway, since now just read the sentence again and see that does it really tell you something about time, right? And so since meeting her idol, so it's not giving you reason for something happening. It's like since the time she met her idol, right? Right from the time she met her idol, she's been super motivated. Whereas the since over here gives you a reason for why she decided to pursue her interest in the arts. It's because, right? I mean, you could very well use because over here, right? So here's another thing. Some, I won't say all, definitely not all, but some of the uh, what are these subordinating conjunctions are interchangeable. So I could say because she couldn't get into med school, Fauzi decided to pursue her interest in the arts, right? So you could do that. Another thing. I can rewrite this as a compound sentence. Okay. So, for example, let's use so. Fausia couldn't, oops, too close, get into med school. So she decided to pursue her interests in the arts. And since I've converted this into a compound sentence, I have two main clauses. For Fausia couldn't get into med school, he decided to pursue interest in the arts. So those are two main clauses. Those are two complete simple sentences which I can treat separately as well. Right, and so just showing you that you can play around with how you want to express yourself. Okay, I can change the sentence with because or some of these other sentences. I'm not saying it's workable every time, not necessarily, but it is doable, right? In I would say a number of scenarios where you can decide whether you want it to be expressed as a compound sentence or as a complex sentence. And again, why would you want to do that? One is to, right, it's basically boiling down to, I would say, at the end of the day, how that makes your writing look. What do you want to, like the way you want it to be conveyed to the reader, right? To put it simply, there, so you don't want a piece of writing that is just simple sentences, right? You don't want them all to be compound, you don't want them all to be complex, right? In fact, if you just have like long complex sentences in your writing, that also makes it very tedious. Okay, so that's not something we want. And so, right, you mix it all up. You have some simple sentences, compound complex sentences are obviously good to add. And yeah, as he bought a new jacket, as the old one was quite worn. Students tend to confuse quite with quiet, so just be on a lookout for that. Now we have a so that, and just like since, right, there's another so that comes in later. So just keep it in mind. So this is the so that for reason. So that our schedule remains flexible, we'll be traveling by bus and train. Right, so obviously buses and trains are far more flexible as compared to taking flights. In order to, the company ran a promotional campaign in order to attract more, sorry, not, yeah, more customers. All right, Google tells me I have got 15 minutes. So I'll see if I can utilize them. All right, so we're done with reason. I hope you guys are not getting tired just watching me write. I am trying to sprinkle some grammatical wisdom throughout this thing. I'm not writing everything like, those tidbits, tips. And so I hope you're taking notes. Do not commit it to memory because you'll forget it before the class is over. So, right, any class you take, always have some writing material with you so you can make notes, right? Uh, Someone once said a short pen is better than a long memory, and it is very true. Quickly note something down, you'll have that for much longer than you think you'll be able to remember. Just, just like that. Okay, concession. So as I mean, concession is, allowing something, giving room for something to happen. And so we're starting off with though, and let's see if that would make sense. Some sentences would not be as clear as to what concession means, so I'm trying to pick out the ones that are. So though they were being very discreet, it is exam season at schools. The teacher caught on to their attempt at cheating. And I hope none of you are thinking, amateurs. Right? And so this is giving allowance to the fact that they tried very hard, but they still got caught. And again, I can change this to they were being very discreet, but the teacher caught on to their attempt at cheating. So I can change that to a compound sentence as well. I can, the teacher caught on to their attempt at cheating, though they were being very discreet. I can move that about. So all the things you've talked about, right? Many of those are applicable. Then you've got although, and though and although are pretty much the same thing. It's just a matter of a bit of formality, right? Though is, I think, less formal than although, if I'm not mistaken. But in terms of meaning, they're the same. So you can replace though with although or vice versa. Right? In a formal piece of writing that you would have to do for dieted writing, you'd want to use although. So they struggled to answer the questions, although they had prepared well for the test. Now, another thing I want to highlight, I'm guessing most of my sentences are in past tense, maybe like one or two has been in present, I'm not sure. But when you're writing a sentence and sentences add up to make paragraphs and paragraphs add up to make entire piece of writing, uh, you can obviously play around and right, but the general you know, when you get to sort of experiment, are certain cases, but in general, a piece of writing should be in the same tense. Right now, saying the same tense doesn't mean like it should all be in the simple past tense. No, if you're writing it in past tense, as you can see over here, struggled is simple past and had prepared is past perfect. So saying in the same tense meaning all the four variants of that particular tense. So if I'm writing in the past, I can do simple past, past continuous, past perfect, or past perfect continuous. All four of them are valid. They're all four because all four of them are the past tense, right? But I don't want to mix present and past, or even the future. That is something that students generally tend to do, right? They flip flop between tenses. So if you're writing it in present, right, you can change. They struggle to answer the questions, although they have prepared well for the test. So maybe I'm like they're two invigilators in class and they're talking to each other. They're struggling even though they've prepared well, right? And so that would be present. And so then you'd have simple present and present perfect. So, right, maintain the tense in your writing. You have to be careful about that. Okay. Then we've got even though. So even though she met all the requirements, she didn't manage to make the list, right? And what making the list means is be chosen, or become a finalist or something. Okay, how much time is Google Meet telling me? I still have 8 minutes. Can I push through condition? I won't be able to push through condition. What I'm going to do is I'm going to skip condition. So just remind me tomorrow that that's pending. And I'm going to talk about place because that only has two conjunctions, right? And so we have where, and again, this is not the one which is a question, right? Where are you going? This is a conjunction. So I live in a neighborhood where everyone gets together, oh, extra e, for dinner once a month. Sounds like a good neighborhood. And then you've got wherever. Mind the spelling. We'll meet wherever, wherever's, right? So that's wherever is convenient for you. And there's not a lot left, right? So we've only got condition. There are a number of those, but still, right? Just so uh, we've got condition, then comparison, and then finally purpose. So we'll do those tomorrow. Any questions about anything we've talked about today or any of the conjunctions?
No.
No, sir.
All right. So,
No, sir.
right, hopefully going over these will help you improve your writing, right? And that's only going to happen when you try and put them into your writing. So, use them. right? That's the only way a language, you're going to gain proficiency in your language. You will make mistakes, but that's part of the learning process. Okay, so I will see you guys again tomorrow. We'll continue from here, and then we will, right, move towards punctuations. So see you next time, inshallah.
Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.
Okay, Allah.
Allah Hafiz.